Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you are all doing well. I've got quite a few things to talk about this morning, or wherever you're listening this at. I see someone saying 1 a.m. in Australian time is what I get for watching Americans. I know exactly how you feel when I would schedule things with my friends who are Australian guests or anyone who lives across the pond or the ocean. Definitely not fun to do, but I appreciate you listening nonetheless. If not, the VOD will be here after the show. And I'll upload things onto podcast platforms later this week. I know there's a bit of a backlog. So I'm enjoying my time off of sorts. And by that, I mean budget cuts and government layoffs, but that's okay. It wasn't on a federal level. I didn't get doged directly. Indirectly, yes, but that's fine. Nevertheless, I'm going to enjoy my time being alive here, and I've got a few interviews lined up. So that's my little update here. For right now, I just wanted to cover a few things that have been on the news and going out and about to what on earth has been going on. I put down in the description things like mythology as well as the news and some other things that are going on. We're going to probably keep this to a nice tight hour, if not hour and a half, depending on super chats and questions. We're not going to go on too long. I'll leave the long form podcasting to Dave Green and others like him. Although Dave has been such a great influence on me, I'm very thankful that he has the patience of a saint to deal with the news and with people out in sort of the mainstream circle. So good for him. Good for him. I have been spreading my posts to a certain VTuber server. Well, that is terrifying. It's the last thing I need is to have that crowd coming over here. But nevertheless, we're going to carry on. So there were a few things that I wanted to cover today, and primarily talking about frame games and some of the recent stuff I've seen on my timeline, alongside more current news that's been going on with Spectacle, as well as what's been recently happening both in Rome and across the world. And then I'm going to end it on sort of a funny note, because I'm going to finish writing the Substack, but I'm also going to talk about it with you guys, because I can finish an incomplete thought in a Substack essay. I cannot... there's this, I think it was Jay Burden or Dave Green who had said, a live stream is an incomplete thought. And I think that that's sort of the way that all live streams are. It's very difficult sometimes, I think, to have coherent messaging live unless you take notes ahead of time. And even then, you're just giving a lecture, right? So here we go. Man, the news has been sort of nuts as of late, but I mean, what day in the world is it not crazy in that regard? But I've found it interesting that my timeline has been filled with a recent set of, and of course, once you get to a certain point on Twitter in size, especially if you're an American, I know that all group chat culture exists. Twitter is sort of a battlefield, as is really all online forums, that they are these avenues in which we are going to discuss how, this is our plan of attack. This is how we're going to get these guys. This is what we're going to do here. And I think that that's not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, let's not kid ourselves in that regard. It's like gang shootings. We're all in group chats plotting how we're going to post something that's going to piss off people, or if we're going to maximize viewership on a specific talking point. So, like, I know where a good chunk of all those JD Vance memes originated. I know where a lot of sort of this crypto runs have come from some mutuals, some people are just in group chats that I know of. But I mean, I'm not here to disclose that. It's just insider baseball. I think everyone knows that Twitter, by and large, especially like political Twitter, if you're trying to get mainstream attention, it's going to be always generated in a writer's room. And every group chat is a writer's room. And I've described all the chats that I've ever started as writers' rooms, especially with other posters and writers and content creators, because I like them and I think that they have interesting things to say. And when you have actual people that you could, I guess, call friends, maybe in the FERENS, friends kind of way, then all of a sudden, like, you can have a pretty set of diverse talking points and argumentation. And at the end of the day, there's still this respectful masculine camaraderie that says, we might have our differences, but we can at least get along on the major issues that matter. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I think that yesterday's news about the papacy probably was the best example I've seen in a long time, where there was like actual virulent disagreement over things and people getting very passionate over the issues. So we'll get into that in just a second. But I thought it would be sort of fun to do these sort of quick takes. I mean, very early on when the channel started, I would go live at random points of the day just to sort of talk about things that are on my mind or get my thoughts out there. I have a little PowerPoint presentation just to have little notes on there. But other than that, we're just going to run through these things and we're going to talk about them. And I'll read a few things as well that I've seen that I think are pretty darn good. And I'll probably get my camera up in a second. I just took a shower. I got dressed for the live stream as I typically do. And here we are. I just got back from running a few miles. So one of the things that I had noticed, and I had played a not a small part in it, but I just, posted about it myself, was the recent conversation between Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay. And I feel like everyone sort of talked about this. I think Vox Day had a very good take, and we'll get onto that in a second here. So I'm going to just change my slides here. But we're going to get a return to name games. We're going to get a return to frame games. There's been a very concentrated effort by a variety of people to get you to talk about, what is, this is, I think, the third or fourth attempt to get the phrase woke right up into attention. And because it's been so memed, unfortunately, I think that this might be the one that sticks it, because this is where meme culture allows you to inadvertently allow certain terminology to stay around in the ether a lot longer. However, there are certain memes and trends that are very much dead. No one goes to r/advice animals to find like the latest cutting edge of mimetic dialogue or discourse, although you never really went there for that to begin with. On top of that, we had talked about plenty of memes and ways to make money earlier on. And I will genuinely be surprised if there isn't in the next, 6 months, depending on how this goes out, or even in the next, 6 days, if someone doesn't make a woke right token or shitcoin. I would be pleasantly surprised, because once a meme takes off, whether it's the JD Vance meme, whether it's the one that we've covered on the Discourse Corner, which I'll have a new episode out later this month, whether it was about like the Fat GF thing and the Plapjack stuff, like there is this whole new ecosystem in which memes have become a platform of monetization in a way that I think NFTs could only wish they were a few years ago. Like, you couldn't weaponize a Bored Ape. You couldn't weaponize or add mimetic charge to sort of the NFT scene from a few years ago. Now, I get it that the crypto environment and sort of the regulatory stuff around it has radically changed since, 5-6 years ago, and even just 4 years ago, when Biden had gotten into office. So I mean, things radically changed in between Solana and all of these other sort of crypto exchange platforms. Like, there's an interesting way to make a quick buck, and you had saw that even with the dark MAGA stuff that happened during the 2024 election cycle. If you have an ability and an entrepreneurial mind to make some money off of a mimetic moment, it's the same way about making t-shirts and mugs after a big event. I don't find anything wrong with it. And just because it's a way to make money, and I don't blame anyone in this present day and age in the year of our Lord 2025 from trying to secure the bag. I really don't. And I think that it's good that people are trying to do that. However, I think that one of the things you have to consider out of all of that is also that it's a lot different than selling a t-shirt, or a lot different than selling a mug or a platform or classes or courses. This isn't the LinkedIn style posting of, well, this thing happened to me, and here are the 10 steps I learned about how to increase B2B, sales as a service techniques, or whatever, things that you would see on LinkedIn right now, which is a really interesting place to be. I have sort of this lurker LinkedIn account that I have with a fake name, and I use it to just sort of peruse what people are posting. And it's particularly interesting, especially since the war between India and Pakistan seems to be rising in tensions and engaging in combat. So we'll get into that though in a minute. So, as every time that there is this particular push on the right, and America being the most like psyops place on the planet, you have to your psychosecurity is in a very tenuous state, I think, to say the least, unless you're inside these writers' rooms, and unless you're inside these group chats. It becomes very difficult for, I would say, the untrained eye or just the normal passing consuming audience, say you guys, although I think you guys are way more intelligent than most people would give you credit for. You're able to kind of tell when there's a sniff test. You can kind of look at it and be like, yeah, this feels like bullshit to me. And I think that's certainly true when it comes to some of the memes or talking points that kind of get boosted up. Other times, if you're completely unaware, then the average person who is trying to make sense of the world is kind of put into this state of like very terrifying confusion, because on one hand, you don't have the inside knowledge. You're not in the writer's room, so you don't really know, is this meme organic? Is this talking point organic? Has it been laundered through 5 different group chats, 5 different editions, or a writer's room, or a Substack? Is there a term or a phraseology that you're just completely unfamiliar with, and you don't know that it might have origins from a group that's linked to, I don't know, say, a foreign entity, whether it be like Russia or Israel or Qatar or China or whatever? Do you have the wherewithal to maybe sit down and do your homework? And most people don't, because it's kind of easy to just laugh at a meme that gets high visibility and then go on from that. And it's always the low effort dumb shit that goes very far in these on Twitter. I've noticed. A friend of mine who is on a locked account, he is always like this really great writer, and I think that he should be in a writer's room. Although he's like, if I were in a writer's room, I would just kill all the other writers because I don't belong there, and I don't blame him. But he had made this joke about the vice president saying the conflict between India and Pakistan is none of our concern, and he had made a quip about the in-laws thing. And I'm like, well, you're behind a locked account. You've already posted about it. And I asked if I could run with it on my main, and he said, yeah, sure. And this isn't the first time I've done this with him. He's a good friend of mine. And that little in-laws meme I had put out, this Twitter post from last night, ended up doing like 1.5 million views. Again, dumb place, but all group chats can be writers' rooms if you want them to be. And so I had someone, and you can go through the quote tweets, and one of them is from some CNN lady, and I blocked her just because I'm not going to give her the the pleasure of giving her take while the tweet can be seen. But these things are not going to go away anytime soon, and I think that it means that you're left wondering where things are coming from. Now, I say all this as a guy who does this part-time. I have, always had a job. I have always worked, in part because my medical situation kind of requires me to work for insurance purposes. But nevertheless, I find it particularly interesting that, if I'm saying this all about myself, that your enemies and that your political opposition are doing the exact same thing. This is probably the 3rd time that the phrase woke right, particularly from the James Lindsay, Neil Shenvi types, has tried to gain traction. Now, James Lindsay being the interesting character that he is, and I will say the same thing that others have said, I don't think he's stupid. I think that he's just forced to conduct a really piss poor defense of liberalism. And he has to do it in a way that he's trapped, I think. And I mean, he is trapped. Let's not kid ourselves. For a guy who was an Obama era new atheist, his earliest books are about how we don't need God and that we need rationalism, to now getting into grievance studies and kind of taking the same route that, Camille Paglia did, saying like, listen, these lefties are going to eat up your institutions. They're going to destroy Western civilization. But also at the same time, like, you have a lot of political priors that are with the people that are going to allegedly and are so far succeeding in destroying Western civilization. So it kind of puts you in an awkward spot. I find it particularly interesting that James Lindsay, an avowed atheist and a guy who does not like Christianity at all whatsoever, does get to speak at TP USA pastors conferences. Whether, he believes in any sort of religion or moral therapeutic deism is a whole other thing. That just indicates to me that, as obviously, he's part of a network. And these networks are going to coordinate and plan out and war game ideas in the exact same way you and I do when we post on the internet, or we write essays, or we engage in politics in real life. So, if the right has always sort of been the leading charge for names, because we've engaged in a decentralized platform where there's not a lot of intermediation. There's no central authority figure outside of your quote unquote thought leaders. And even then, those thought leaders can change their mind, or encounter their ideas on sort of this like digital battlefield and see how well they hold up. And sometimes they hold up well, sometimes they don't. I think Vox Day and his great bits about like alpha and gamma males, like that's held up incredibly well because people still use that. In the same way, we've kind of moved on from calling people social justice warriors to just calling them leftists, libtards, and the rest. And I mean, they've got stuff for the right as well, Monarch Kitty, fascists, fascies, all sorts of things that if you wanted to go through it. And most of the time, it just gets pretty straightforward. And as I wonder how much Moldbug likes his idea of formalism. Do you think Curtis, looks at the Twitter timeline of raging leftists who advocate for like total right wing or rightoid death, and it's just like, yes, this is the formalism I was writing about, in 2008. And if not, then although he is on Twitter, so I guess I could just ask the guy. But I don't particularly. He's doing his own thing. So, we have frame games, and funny names are certainly back on the table. And it is particularly funny that we see like the old-fashioned like 1.0 Groiper on the screen here with the YouTube thumbnail that Peterson has. And for all that Peterson has been through, this is sort of the Shakespearean tragedy of his entire career. Like, Maps of Meaning, I have a copy of it. It's pretty good. His lectures on Jung are pretty good. And I'm not really a guy who's delved all that deep into psychoanalysis or psychology, but I enjoyed them. I thought that I took something away from them, and they were pretty good. And then you go from, I think, a rather organic moment about being against compelled speech about the whole transgender bill, or what was it, like C-17 or C-16 in Canada, to now being this huge sort of figure where you've been through really, well, I don't even want to call it Shakespearean. It's almost like a Dostoevsky-esque tragedy, because you get hooked on these drugs and then with anxiety, and then you go through a radical, sort of detox program in Russia. You're not the same man. You're emotionally incontinent. You cry very often, which I find just to be really, I don't know what the male version of the ick is, but it's certainly, I have that with, Dr. Peterson. And it's really strange to think about when I was in college many years ago now, or about a decade ago, and it actually has been 10 years. Good God. But, to be in college and to talk to other white guys, and I was in very progressive circles when I was in college. I did speech and debate. It helped pay for some of my university. I was active in political clubs and debate clubs 10 years ago as a normie. And as a guy who engaged in normal county GOP politics, I engaged as an elections judge. I was a precinct chair. I put forward resolutions at county conferences and did stuff for like state level work. I did phone banking for Rand Paul in 2016, and then eventually voted for Trump against Hillary Clinton. I helped work with Ted Cruz as a phone banker in his 2018 Senate campaign against Beto O'Rourke. So, I mean, back then I was a totally different guy. But even back then, people would kind of pull you to the side and like, well, what do you think about like Jordan Peterson and things like that? Like, he was the edgy Sosmodot of like 10 years ago. And it sort of just illustrated where white guys who were not already keyed in were. That you could have people who would consider themselves liberal or apolitical or even just non-frothing leftists, which happens to be most white guys if they're straight. You don't really see that in sort of the cesspit of sort of the alphabet soup of all these sort of drama and other groups. But, that was how it was 10 years ago. And I mean, for instance, 10 years ago, I would be driving my very old Ford Taurus from work to college. And what I would listen to all the time was three things. Because again, when I was in college, it was the first time I got a smartphone, so to speak. I always had a prepaid dumb phone, which I kind of miss and I want to go back to. But it would be three things. It would be Rush Limbaugh on the EIB network. It would be Carl Benjamin when he was still doing This Week in Stupid. And then it would be NPR's All Things Considered. And I considered myself back then a pretty well-rounded individual because I would read things like Foreign Affairs, The Wall Street Journal. I had The Economist as a paid subscription as a student, which was a great discount. And I would read Chronicles as well as the National Review. This was what I was doing when I was a young guy. I was the exact same kind of person you would make fun of in high school for being well dressed and wanting to argue with people. I look back at myself and I certainly cringe. But enough about my personal life. So I watched a little bit of it because it's like 2.5 hours long, and I was not gonna watch the whole thing. I can't. I could. I'm just going to watch it at 2 times speed, which I almost never do. I usually listen to most things at the normal pace because I just don't want to do that to my brain. And a lot of the conversation really just is this rehashed horseshoe theory. Well, you see, both sides are actually the same because they believe in like identity politics and that they're both increasingly tribal. And we need to stay on the straight and narrow path of liberalism. And we need to return to this sort of like meritocratic, race blind attitude because these guys are just as bad as these identitarians that we were being denounced by, 10 years ago on the left. And now, of course, as all things, James and Dr. Peterson and the rest of them are more fearful of right-wing pushback than anything else. And anyone who's been around in politics for any length of time knows that when it comes to these things, the liberals will always like, I'm sorry, commies. Like you guys were wrong. Like the liberals will always side with the communists to stop anything from the right, whether it's fascism, whether it's even, moderate paleoconservatism, anything that remotely pushes back against the excesses of modern day liberalism is always going to be with the strangest coalition of capital, with the strangest coalition of, these radical state-sponsored terrorists on the left, whether it be trans activists, these Zizians or whatever, and then these guys who are trying to be the respectable viewpoint, and they're no different than the Jonah Goldbergs of the world 10 years ago. I have a copy of Jonah Goldberg's Liberal Fascism from, I want to say, 2014 is when that book came out, or around that time frame when the Great Awakening happened. And he was seen as this respectable National Review. I have the logical arguments to prove while my point of view is the correct one, and we need to push forward. Anything too further to the right is radical or quote unquote the alt-right. And now, these guys have taken up the same position, just with, I think, they haven't been as completely mind broken by Trump being in office. Whereas Jonah Goldberg and the rest of those never Trumpers kind of just formed the Dispatch and have just been basically, really nice Democrat neoliberal types. So, I mean, to call things the woke right is to call things the alt-right or to call things the Nazis. And I mean, even now, like the dissident right has been given this label by this crowd, Neil Shenvi and the rest of them, to be a sort of a catch-all term, which is really funny because that term has always just been used as a kind of collective catch-all to describe the fact that no one wants to use the word alt-right. No one wants to use the phrase alternative right. That Paul Gottfried's excellent coined term had been ran with and taken by Richard Spencer and others, and it died. Because I liked that term because there was an alternative. The only place where alternative still exists is literally with the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. And even then, like that's not. I mean, that's probably the only place. And even then, they want to ban it in the same way that they would love to ban us or things like that. So, like, these frame games are coming out. And I know that this means that there will be more debates, that there will be more interlocutors like Benjamin Boyce, who I genuinely like talking to. I don't know when he and I recorded a few weeks, I think like the week before Holy Week, to talk. I think it was sometime during Lent. I don't know if that episode has ever come out or not. I need to go talk to him about it. But I mean, we talked for like 2 hours. I mean, and I genuinely enjoy talking to Ben. I think that he has a good heart, and I don't have anything negative to say about him. I think he's a good person. He's been on the Digital Archipelago, I think, once or twice. And but I know that he's just going to have James or someone like James to probably debate Dave all over again. And I don't have Dave's patience, and thank God for it. Like when it was funny too, because he had messaged me a few weeks ago to talk to him or to record something with him. And I literally told Ben, I was like, I don't have Dave Green's patience. I said, I don't have that degree of maturity to talk to people I fervently disagree with for that length of period of time, in part because I don't have Dave's background. I don't come from a progressive blue state background. I very much have red state heart and mind in how I view the world in a lot of ways, for better and for worse. But also I'm a third culture kid, so it's very, I jokingly tell people I'm the closest thing to a rootless cosmopolitan without the anti-Semitic connotations that come with that phrase. But these things aren't going away anytime soon. Anytime that there's a push to do anything, that's the case. And even in Britain, you have the same thing that Hope Not Hate has been attacking the basket weavers. They attacked or they listed people that you probably know from the academic agent sphere, like Not So Obvious and the rest of them. And again, like even basic desires to have community, that I should have made that a whole other slide, is about communal living, and we'll get to that actually in the next slide. But there's no, for men especially, and this has been the premier thing. I mean, even Peterson's talked about it, Carl's talked about it, everyone and their mother has talked about this crisis of masculinity. And it's allowed for a great place for people to grift or to despair and to be despondent. But all of these things, again, go back to the core basic tenet that you have primarily young, white, European men, and I mean, really, I'm just going to say white as a catch-all for that, for the sake of argument, who have been dispossessed, despondent, told that they are trash, garbage, worthy of death, etc., and are tired. And they're like, well, wow, these guys are all radicalizing. And it's just like, well, we kind of know how this goes. We've seen the cycle play out time and time again. And to watch Peterson and the rest of them, simply say, oh, well, they're woke right, or, oh, they're just like the woke left, or whatever. No, they're not. The only thing that both sides kind of acknowledge is that there is an existential crisis, and that there is a war going on for survival into the next generation. That's about it. Everyone kind of recognizes that the left is very formal and very real about their genocidal language. And I mean, again, to show how different things are from 10 years ago in 2015 to today, it is. You would never see the phrase anti-white be used in public. You would never see it be used, let alone on government documents, whether it's about South Africa or Vice President Vance, quote tweeting a clip about Ilhan Omar saying this is genocidal language. I mean, really, the rhetorical talking points about all sorts of stuff, and this is how YouTube is going to get me. But like when basically everything about white genocide that had been talked about 10 years ago has been more or less mainstreamed into the public consciousness for better. And for these types, for worse. I mean, even Mr. Old Frame Game himself, Mike Benz, is very popular, despite some of his connections. He's got the eyes and ears for a lot of people in the mainstream conservative movement in the United States, at least. And everyone kind of knows how this game gets played. That there is an organized series of networks, and they're not just funding sources. Like you can cut USAID or whatever, but even then, there's still plenty of money in private sector areas and foundations and NGOs that are self-sufficient or wealthy enough that these people are going to live on indefinitely until either those things are seized and cut, or they've been effectively ousted from public life. And that's how far we still have to go. Is that this sort of stuff about the right-wing backlash or the vibe shift, the vibe shift against Trump is all here. And I really think that what it comes to these sort of framings is going to be about what can you create. And people say that all the time. What can you create? What can you build? What can you do? What is an example? And some people are trying to give an example of that. One example of that, although perhaps I should probably read what he wrote, because I saw his list and I was kind of, very skeptical. But like, for instance, sort of the I'm gonna just lump him in as a general thing. I think he's his own guy, but I mean he praises him so much. But like, say Jonathan Keeperman, or everyone knows him as Lomez on Twitter. I'm mutuals with the guy. I've never met him. I've read some of the books that have come out from Passage Press. Some of them are good, some of them not so much. And although I've never bought anything from them, full disclosure, I've done the creator gets to review things because he's friends with people in that circle. And the same thing I've done for Antelope Hill. Like I've reviewed and I have a copy of Millennium, but it's not because I bought it. It's because I know the Antelope Hill guys and I are mutuals on Twitter, and I was given a chance to interview Marty Phillips and his great book Millennium. And I'm looking forward to the next piece of work that Marty puts out. I think he's a really good writer and a really good mirror when he is on Twitter, because he'll log in and log off very often. But I think he holds a very good mirror up to this sort of scene or ecosystem. And it can be pretty ugly sometimes, but I'm really glad that he does it. And I'm happy that he does. But nevertheless, like, these things are all there and they're not going to go away. But so, Lomez gets interviewed by Ross Douthat of the New York Times, and he lists a few shows, one of them being HBO's Girls as right-wing art, which, I know of HBO Girls only because of Lena Dunham and because of some of the crazy plot lines and shit that get said on that TV show, ranging from abortion to all sorts of stuff. And perhaps, and I don't even consider myself what you would call trad or traditionalist. I'm really not. But also, I'm realistic enough to think that that's probably not what I would consider right-wing art, unless you're arguing that it's for lampooning people on the left, and perhaps that's what it is. I thought that the movie Mickey 17, as awful as it is, kind of gives you this subtle through line throughout the movie that it's like, it's the same through line that we saw with the, perennial Starship Troopers discourse. Left-wing parody attempts at fascism or any sort of right-wing system of values ends up being really funny, and it just proves that liberals are idiots and that they should never be in charge. And that was what I took away from that film. It was incredibly Reddit coded and not good, and I don't recommend that you watch it. But nevertheless, my friend, who is a former poster, he's in law school now, and he is a good friend of mine, IRL. He goes to my church. He drags me to the movies more often than I want to. And I've seen more movies, and I've been to the movie theater more often than not because of him. And on one hand, I'm thankful for it, but on the other hand, I've seen too much cringe in the last 6 months. I think I can stop. So these frame games, these things are here to stay. It feels, I hate to do the Paul Scala stuck culture thing, but things are different because we're now living in a time and place where a lot of the things that were being debated 5 years ago are now mainstreamed and are now platformed. And it's like, okay, well, your guy got in. What are you attempting to build, and what are you attempting to create? And there are a lot of groups out there, whether it's publishing houses or people trying to do films, that I would say they're not like hard-coded right-wing people, and I wouldn't call them normies either, but they're simply trying to make things that are good. And really, that's what I think is the big thing about framing all this, is that there is a return to quality, a return to wanting to be ourselves, a return to something that is meaningful. And not this like, oh, I wish things were back in the 90s. You don't even have the demographics of the 1990s. And I'm going to hammer that point on because that's really the only issue that matters to me, is that all debates over politics are going to really be these circumnavigated, linguistic conversations about demographics. They all are. They're like culture, or even all of the, I think whoever works at the New York Post for all those like lunchtime rowdies or like scholars or jock, all these phrases that people get used. I know they do it on purpose. And I know that the guy who comes up with these phrases probably gets paid really well. But I mean, that's what this is. They're all these sort of like soft coded frames around uncomfortable issues. And eventually you have to burst through and discuss them in detail. Because if you don't, then what are we doing here? We're simply talking out of our ass, and we're wasting oxygen and time arguing with people that are equally aware or are deliberately ignorant and think that you can make this work. And we don't have time. It's as simple as that. We just do not have time for this at all whatsoever. And I think that that's straightforward. As for people that are trying to make things, I mean, there's the various chapters of the Old Glory Club where you've got guys doing everything from researching into progressive programs to cleaning various national park sites and memorial sites of the dead, or preserving historic buildings in hurricane affected areas. Like with Hurricane Helene, I worked with some of the OGC guys in chapters in that part of the country to talk about how the grant writing process works and how to get money for these historic buildings and preservation for rebuilding bridges and things like that. Those are things that matter. And it's going to, and that's what I think about when we talk about like building things, or what are you, cultivating. And not everything is going to be, I think sometimes people just want to be their own thing, like the artistic or literary right scene, if you can call it that, has its own desire to be, well, we kind of just want to be, we want to do our own thing. And that means we want to have parties and we want to do this weird shit. Let them. I encourage it, because at least there's some semblance of creativity and vitality that still exists around here. It may not be to your liking. There's definitely some photos and events that I saw pictures and video of that I'm like, I would be caught dead at these places. But to each their own. I live a little more offline in terms of where I get my real life sort of satisfaction and self-actualization from than I do online, and that's fine. Everyone does their own thing. But I mean, this is sort of the aspect about escapism, right? Is that you have this desire for everyone wanting to be their own thing, or everyone's got their own camp. Everyone wants to be this unique, nuanced character and individual. And I think that sometimes it's very difficult to do that, because the timeline on these social media spaces, Twitter especially, not so much Substack. I think Substack is really as kneecapped as it's been, and Substack is trying to introduce all things at the same time. They're like, well, we want to do live streams, and we want to do this, and we want to do that. And it's just this absolute nightmare and disaster for what Substack has become. It's like, well, we can have live streams now. You can have subscriber-only chats and conversations. I want this just to be a blog platform is what I want. And maybe I should, go back to doing that, but I need to write more to begin with. And I've been saying that for years. But I write everything by hand first, and then I transcribe it, or I'll talk into my phone, upload the audio onto Substack, and its transcription tool is really good. And then I edit that into essays, and I have a few I need to finish editing. So, and I think that you'll notice this, because if you're in chats or if you're having conversations with people on the timeline, you watch as the mimetic discourse around certain things, whether it's Kanye West or whether it's the Pope or anything, they get framed by the memes. They get framed by these like codes, by people who make memes or considered sort of these like thought leaders or talking point guys that you can respect or dislike. And all of a sudden, now you're forced to deal with the fact that, like, oh, I'm on a platform that encourages very short-term communication or short-form communication, usually with an image attached. So it's very pictographic. It's very tribal. And, oh, there's not a lot of room for nuance on the timeline. There's not a lot of room for nuance at all. And not that I'm lamenting that. Well, I am lamenting its death, because I think that most offensive, or most people who take offense to things, or most people who that might call you something, or call something, like brown coded or whatever, it often muddies the discourse to a level and degree where all of a sudden you don't have the opportunity to flesh out why you think the thing that you do. And even if you have that opportunity to, how many people are actually going to read it, instead maybe read the first few sentences and write you off? That's always going to be a problem, I think, in short form spaces. And I think some of the best, I don't want to say drama, but some of the best discursive conversations do happen off Twitter, or they happen behind the scenes via group chats and the rest. And I think that it really does depend on the individual that you're talking to or arguing with, is that, do they have the same capacity to hear you out in the way that you hear them out? And if they can't, well, then congratulations. It's the same conversation about good faith. And then you can kind of just, wipe the dust off your sandals and go on to the next chat, next town, next topic, and sort of realize that this is not a friendly place for you at all whatsoever. But one of the things I've noticed over the last 2 months, and I wanted to record this take on it, and I have some of it recorded, and I should probably just finish it and put it out. But a couple of weeks ago, there was this huge, some comic or some artist that had gone out, and it was particularly humorous to me because it was a photo, or it was a comic depicting this old story, or this old little, I think it's a Tumblr post from several years ago, where it said, imagine going back in time to watch, Christ give the Sermon on the Mount, and then for him to politely look at you and speak in perfect English, "Go home." And someone had drawn that as a comic, and I like the idea. I think it's a fun little concept to think about in my head. That God and his infinite capabilities as God, but also as perfect man, to sort of turn to you and be like, you are not supposed to be here. It's a fun concept to think about, but nevertheless, those things happened in a place and time for a reason. And someone had made this comic, and it had gotten viral. It had a few million views on Twitter. And there were a lot of people on the left, these sort of, the 18, sign, like no one under 18, minors do not inquire, or whatever, those types of people that you would see on Twitter and other platforms, enjoy the comic. And the artist had made several more. And there was this tweet that has stuck with me for like the last couple of months. I don't want to say it got stuck in my craw, but it is certainly stuck in my mind, where they had said, I'm not a Christian, but I love the Jesus community. And I'm like, oh boy, wait till you find out what the Greek word ecclesia means. It means community. It's where we get the word the church from. Because that's how it started out, was as a series of communities of those in one mind and in one belief about who Jesus was and is. And that tweet has stuck in my craw for just a long time. And I find it particularly entertaining, because it's just like, oh, I love the Jesus community, I'm just not a Christian. And it's like, oh boy, do I have some news for you. But nevertheless, that happened. And then you have the recent stuff with the repose of Pope Francis, and now Pope Leo the 14th. May he be as conservative as the last Pope Leo. But nevertheless, I'm not a Catholic. I'm not going to speak too much on it, on the papacy itself. But I did find sort of the process of the conclave really entertaining to watch as an outsider looking in on Twitter, just to see all these people go about it. And I thought this tweet was particularly interesting, because they're standing church cardinals like K-pop group members now. Like, who the heck is Zuppy? Like, if you're not a Roman Catholic, and if you're not someone who pays attention to Vatican politics like myself, none of it, like, this is kind of bizarre to watch sort of the secular world look outside into the magisterium of the Roman Church and treat it like like they're standing something, like these are people that you want to get behind. And I know that betting on a conclave is something that's excommunicable under the Roman Church. And of course, policy, all these places where you can bet on political events and outcomes are all out there right now, and they're all they were betting on who is going to be the next pope. And so it was very interesting to sort of watch all this play out. Like, oh, the same thing that we've witnessed about religion in the United States, and really in all parts of the Western world, has been reduced to these sort of commodified consumer identities. I purchase things, I put things in my bio, and I am going to identify with X team now. I am now Catholic. I've got my little buffalo in my Twitter handle. It's a way to identify me as a confessional Lutheran. I've got, the 3-barred cross on, so people identify me as being Orthodox or whatever. And anyone who's been on my Twitter account, or anyone who knows me, well enough online, is that I don't really talk too much about religion, because it's not my place. I'm not a theologian, either in the studied sense or in the lived experience sense, because theology is lived out. And I kind of keep to myself on these issues, because I don't want to become another guy who becomes a polemicist or an apologist, in the sense that people who don't read the original Greek, or people who don't read Slavonic or Latin, are arguing about things that they may not know themselves. And I take what St. James writes in his general epistle very seriously. Like, people who teach, people who speak will be judged more harshly. And I mean, even though I'm not teaching on things about, the Orthodox faith, I am a representative and a witness of it. And at the same time, I talk to you guys, and I give lectures on things, and I talk about all that stuff. I take that very seriously, because I know at the end of my life, and at the end of all time, to stand before the dread judgment seat of Christ and be like, well, Matthew, you've said all this shit on Twitter. And like, that's the other thing too. I'm like, I have 30,000 tweets on a Twitter account that's been around since October of 2020. And all that's going to be read out one day, and there's not a single thing that I haven't done that won't be revealed. I think about that, a lot, as one should. And so I try not to talk about it too much. But I've witnessed over the last, 5 years I've been on Twitter, and even prior to that online, as a regular person under my real name when I was doing sort of normie, establishment politics, is how easy religion has been reduced and commodified, and that the faithful, and I do mean capital F faithful, regardless of your confession, denomination, or whatever, are kind of left just holding the bag while people will open their mouth. It's sort of the meme where like someone's apologizing for someone, and then you get like the crazy person in the back like that. I've seen that meme about Edward Gibbon, and he's just like, look, man, you got to give him some credit. He was the first historian about like the fall of the Roman Empire, and then you've got crazy Gibbon in the background. It's just like the Christians did it, and it's just that's sort of how I think about it sometimes with this regard. But I mean, I don't want to call it fandomification. I mean, that's always been around, but even before the word fandom existed. But people, because even the word fan comes from fanatics, and we would use that derogatorily in America in the 1800s about baseball fans, because that used to be the nice, true American sport, and it still is. And I will defend baseball as my one sports ball defender thing. Even though the Baltimore Orioles suck, I still follow them because I used to live in Maryland for a period of time in my youth. I've been to a few Baltimore Orioles games, so I like to follow them. I'm in Texas now, and despite all my family really being from here and other parts of the country, I don't really follow baseball all that much anymore as I used to. Although I still watch the World Series, but that's just me. So all this, the spectacle and escapism, even though he and I probably disagree on a lot of things, like Frody has this great phrase about, nationalist Narnia or digital escapism, that we can allow ourselves to live primarily within our own heads online above all other places and not really look out the window. This was a big influence on my sort of digital deracination talking point from, several years ago now. I mean, there's a whole video. I gave a talk on it at the first Sildings conference in the US. And I think a lot of that still holds up in the sense that it's very easy to decouple our social contextualization inside of the world or inside of this online space, and not so much about what's going on literally right outside my window. Although I don't have the world's greatest view outside my apartment window from my bedroom. I do from the other part. But you don't have this chance to really sort of look at the world around you. And I think that generates a great degree of political dissonance, in the sense that you can be super well versed in theory, you can be super well versed in all kinds of politics, but you probably can't name your city councilman, and you probably don't know who your county commissioner or even your mayor is. And I think that causes a great disconnect, because at least in America, a lot of our problems are local, in the sense that your roads, your taxes, well, not really some of your taxes, but like bonds, things about your schools, those things do have a huge impact on the politics at the local level. And if that isn't being addressed, well, then you've got a problem going on here. And I think that that's sort of an important thing to consider when talking about where we are online and things like that. But at the same time, when you're online, there's a really good chance that people who are in high up positions can read your shit. This is why, whether you love him or hate him, Martin, at the Captive Dreamer, as he's been going by, who I'm mutuals with, I've talked with him. He's a nice guy. I don't have really too many negative things to say about him. But he's followed by the Vice President of the United States, as are a few other of my mutuals. And it's just like, oh, you have a chance to sort of post things into public consciousness and get them out there. And it's the way that you can have these debates over things ranging from the H-1B discourse, issues ranging from Indian immigration to Israeli influence on the United States to all sorts of things. And those things can get the eyes and ears of people in power, because Twitter is, for better and for worse, the platform in which all major Western leaders are going to follow forth and do things. Now, this also means the spectacle of American politics is going to ripple out through the rest of the world, where American influence or hegemony is still relatively strong. One of the things that I have noticed with a lot of progressive, or with a lot of like conservative or American-style conservative parties in other parts, primarily in the Anglosphere, is what I've called like the TPUSAification of like conservatism abroad. So like, there's a Turning Point United Kingdom, which I think was ran or is currently owned by Candace Owens' husband, who's this British guy whose dad was in telecommunications and is or was a member of the House of Lords. That's a strange connection that I think people should do more research into. But there's that, and I mean, even Reform or UKIP at some point, and even the Conservatives themselves have tried this 2015 Charlie Kirk style of engagement politically, which is particularly strange because it just does not work, because American politics just does not work in countries like Britain. It does not work in countries like Germany or, anywhere really on the continent. And even to watch it happen out on the Anglosphere is particularly interesting, because American politics is so apples to oranges in a lot of ways in comparison to Britain or Canada or any part of the Anglosphere. We are an exceptional nation in the sense that it's very hard to compare our systems to everybody else. But because of cultural hegemony, the spectacle of American politics, of course, is this looming shadow over all other Western politics. And during the Biden administration and during COVID and during everything like that, there was this sort of discussion over a right-wing international, a right-wing internationalist, where I want all countries to basically be, Germany for Germans, England for English, America for Americans, Canada for Canadians, which are sentiments I agree with wholeheartedly. But at the same time, nationalism and forms of intellectual and international competition also means we're going to butt heads in a lot of places. And it's not like, as we saw with the Canadian election not too long ago, it's not as if the shadow of Trump and American conservatism doesn't play a role as to how the rest of the world in the West reacts to its politics domestically. We saw this during the first Trump administration, where people were telling Angela Merkel, like, don't be so harsh on the United States. He'll be out in 4 years. Like, this is a temporary aberration. Obviously, Trump came back, and that sort of looming political moment is still here with us, and it's going to loom over all forms of this administration and what happens abroad. Like, you've had Marco Rubio and JD Vance argue with the German government over Twitter about the Alternative for Deutschland party, and them wanting to ban it, or them being a quote-unquote threat to democracy. This lesbian party leader who's got some parts of her platform that I really like, and I think that the main issue being immigration is always important and should be the only issue that matters, is about immigration and demographics. And now you're watching these arguments play out in the timeline, and the German security state and the German government trying to get the party banned and prevent them from having any rights whatsoever just by associating with them. And even now we're witnessing all sorts of things happen in the Anglosphere as well over it. Like, our European friends are correct when they say that, like, Trump is going to be an impact for the right abroad. And, there are a lot of Americans that are like, well, I just don't care. And I understand both sides of that issue. And I think that it's a little difficult sometimes to flesh that out, because there's this spectacle of American politics where even now with the new Pope, right? People were immediately diving through a Twitter account that they thought was his, and maybe it is his. I haven't been able to confirm it myself. And he was arguing with JD Vance about the order of how we were to love people, and he was saying all these other things from 2020 onward that were pretty progressive. And so it went from this moment where it was like American Pope, USA, 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 to like, fuck. And again, it's not my place to comment on papal politics. I'm not a Roman Catholic. I'm not inside the Vatican. And I think that there are people who are Catholic that can give much better explanations for things whatsoever. And I'll let them do that. But again, you watch these sort of spectacles play out instantaneously on the timeline, to where it'll just give you absolute whiplash and this psychic concussion about things whatsoever. And when it comes to these differences in our political spectacles and what we pay attention to, there's a video I need to revisit, because I've said for a long time, at least for the last year, that it's held up very well. And I should probably go rewatch and re-listen to what I had said. before before I continue to strive to that. But I did a video, I want to say like 3 years ago at this point, called The Two Forests. And it was about comparing American versus European politics. And I treated them like forest management because of that meme about the differences between American and European forests. And when you do that, I had said in that video that, you know, we can learn a lot from each other, but also we have different flora and fauna to deal with in our respective forests that makes our issues very hard sometimes to compare. And that we can learn from each other, and we should learn from each other, but at the same time, we need to be very mindful about where our differences are and where we're going to fundamentally disagree. You know, in the United States, our religiosity, our Christianity, both cultural, political, as well as just the number of actual faithful church-going believers that aren't Christmas and Easter types, is a lot more and is going to play a much bigger impact in America than it really is overseas in Europe. Despite what, you know, the Calvin Robinson types might want to do in the United Kingdom and other places. Do I want Western Christendom to survive? Yeah, absolutely. I've been, as someone who grew up over there, I lived right across the road from an old Catholic church that was 800 years old, that would ring the bells every morning, and especially on Sundays where it still had a small group of faithful attendants. You know, like that sticks with you. I've been to numerous cathedrals. I went to Notre Dame before it burned down. I've been to the great Gothic cathedrals in Cologne. I've been to Westminster Abbey. I've been to so many places growing up as a teenager and as a kid that it leaves this remarkable impact on you that people built these things. And what's so cool about like the Cologne Cathedral, for those that have been there, is right next to this amazing Gothic cathedral that is, you know, 100 some odd feet tall, and it reaches towards the heavens. It's right next to it is this museum of Roman artifacts and where the Romans lived in Germania and the people that lived here and this trade and everything that took place. And you realize just how old that place is. And you realize how old the world is beneath your feet. And as the old saying goes, for Americans, 100 years is a long time, and to Europeans, 100 miles is forever. You know, when I tell my friends, oh, it's a 4-hour drive, that's not so bad, they look at you like you're nuts. And if you live overseas as an American, you know that if you drive for 4 hours in certain parts of Europe, you've driven through 3 or 4 countries, you know? And so there are these differences, and they're, you know, very hard sometimes for us to understand. And it also means that sort of the abrasive frat boy attitude. And I think about that. Do you guys remember that store that was popular maybe like 10, 15 years ago? Like that shirt was cash, or it would be, you know, like the right to bear arms, and it was a tank top, and it was like very raw American frat boy thing. One, I realized that guy is still around, and he and I are mutuals, and he and I have talked before. But two, that kind of attitude you still very much see on the Twitter timeline. And that sort of like a red state kind of nationalism, I know gets under the skin of a lot of my European friends, but also it's innately part of American culture. And those are some gaps that we're just not going to be able to bridge. And I think that that's understandable and fair. And I should probably revisit that video, and maybe I'll write about it in the future. But at the same time, we're all dealing with these forms of escapism. We're all trying to get ourselves out there into the world and to be seen and to be heard. And it means very often you've got to pick sides. You can't really be your own guy. I'm communally speaking, I've got like I'm with the OGC as a founding member. I write for them. I've been on Pony Express Radio. I think that it is good that young men in America have places to go, and it has gotten the attention of other people in various chapters to get involved in political action, but also just to do things where young men don't feel alone, and that there isn't an escape in terms of the soma that we engage with online or the doom scrolling or demoralization porn, but there's actual community. I think Americans especially, more so than my European counterparts, although I think the internet has done a great job at creating this for them, the destruction of the third place and all that, is that we don't really live communally as Americans. And I don't mean that in the like, oh, well, the longhouse or whatever. No, what I mean is that, oh, I have work friends, or oh, I do this for a living. I have friends at church, but then I go home and I'm still an individual. Or I go home and like, oh, I'm a husband. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I have these people in my life. I don't really do anything other than that. We don't live communally, because the moment that we step away from the crowd, a light switch goes off and we flip it and we're back to being ourselves. And it's a consequence, of course, of being radically depersonalized in the last 60 years, because Americans used to have a very communal, for lack of a better word, tribal identity. There used to be this way where, I am an American, I am a white guy, I am part of the South, my family is buried here, I have been part of this land for X number of generations. Now, that exists in some places, and it exists online, because online is where you can express those things that have been verboten in public spaces for decades. And I think that it is important, especially now where we live so deracinated and despondent and despair is around every single corner, that we are trying to regain that and to find that back. And it's very hard for us to appreciate what actual communion is, not just in the sense of being participants in the sacraments or in the Eucharist, but communally in the sense that I have people around me that I love, that I can rely on, that I can say, I am a member of this. I am part of this. I distinctly know that if I'm out in the world, and anyone who's part of a high church confession kind of identifies this, like you're going to instantly have more in common with a guy who shares your faith than you are some random stranger. You know that every white guy will give you that look when the lunchtime rowdy is making a mess of things at a gas station or whatever. There are still those vestiges of these sort of communal identities of who we are, and they still exist in high trust societies. I've said it before, and I've said it God knows how many times in other videos, but like the biggest radicalizing thing for me as like a third culture kid and everything else was that I moved back to where my family calls home. Something that I have no real relation to at all whatsoever, because I grew up in all parts of the country and all parts of the world. I have no relation to these people. They're my flesh and blood. I'm totally different than them. I don't play the guitar. I don't listen to country music. I'm relearning how to play the violin. I sing in English, but I mean in Byzantine and in different melodies, and I also know that they're still my family. And I go to every family reunion, despite the fact I have to reintroduce myself or be told time and time again, oh, we haven't seen you since you were this little. And that's fine, because it's worth doing. And it is worth having those connections, whether it be with your fellow members at church or in any other organization or community. Because at the end of the day, you're not just an individual. Yes, you are who you are. And there is that American tradition of the brave individualist who goes out there. But he's not alone, is he? You have your family, you have your wife and kids, you have people that agree with you. And that stuff still is out there if you're willing to reclaim it and to rewild it, so to speak. In the same way that when I'm out and about, it's very easy for me to find like-minded people because of my internet presence, but also due to my faith. And even then, it's hard sometimes to reconcile all that, because you want to go home and realize, oh, I'm back to myself. I'm alone. When really you're not. There are people I've taken care of. There are friends of mine, my teacher, my iconography teacher, who I'm very close with. She lives in a different building, but she and I live in the same apartment complex area. And it's refreshing that you can go over and just talk to somebody for a couple of hours or have a cigarette and talk about what the hell's going on in the world. Like, that's an amazing thing that most people don't have these days. And we've sort of programmed ourselves to be despondent. That sickness unto despair, as Kierkegaard would say it. But the real spectacle is allowing yourself to fade away into that. And that's why, again, I really do think that while some people talk about building things like the Ridge Runner types and whatnot, I applaud their efforts, but I also know that I am not wealthy enough to ever be part of that community. And there are going to be a lot of people who have been fucked over by trade, by the economy, by policy, or by just nature of not having those circumstances before them. They're going to be left alone in whatever happens to this sort of balkanized America or whatever happens going forward. And it's going to be onto the people that are willing to build, that are average guys, or the guys that want to step up and take the reins of leadership to build something and to be part of that. The OGC's got guys that are, young men who are in college or are making by with, an average Joe job, to lawyers and podcasters and the rest. And those are the things that are going to matter at the end of the day, is reforging that sense of community. And for the wealthy, that means that they can escape off into the hills somewhere and get attacked by NBC News 5 outside of Nashville or whatever. For the rest of us, it means trying to deal with whatever crazy shit happens in the next several years. And I know it's only the first 100 some odd days that passed to the Trump administration, but As I said when after the election, and as I've said during all this mess, Trump just buys you more time, and use that time very wisely. And I'll leave it at that. And as for the last thing that I wanted to talk about, as I realize I've been going on for about an hour, and we'll get to the super chats afterwards. We'll move on to the last thing I've got here, which is more on a lighter note, and I need to finish writing about it. So, as I mentioned, I have a very dear friend of mine, a poster, and who's now in law school, a church friend of mine. I love him very much. He's a very good man, but he's also he's younger than me, in that Zoomer millennial divide about how we talk and how we look at politics and what we find funny is very real. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, dude, you make me feel old. You make me feel very old. And I've turned into that 30-year-old boomer meme, and that's fine. I don't mind it. It comes with all sorts of fun things about the graying of my hair, and all the things that come with it. I love it. It's fun. It's great. He makes me feel old. I love him. But he took me to the theater again. He was like, let's go out. And I said, yeah, sure. It beats, arching my back, painting, or trying to put finishing touches on things, or it's better than me trying to throw my head against the wall transcribing something. So we went out a couple of weeks ago and we watched the 20th anniversary theatrical re-release of Revenge of the Sith, the third and final episode of the Star Wars prequels. And it was a crowded theater. We went on I want to say a Sunday afternoon, Sunday matinee after liturgy, and it was like 5 o'clock, or maybe a little later than that. It was a crowded movie theater for a Sunday evening showing of a film that is 20 years old. And it had everybody from people older than me to people my age to, guys much younger than me. Probably grew up with the Star Wars animated stuff and the sequels, God bless them. And I haven't been to see a Star Wars film since Rogue One. So what was it, like 2016? I watched that one, and I really haven't paid attention to what the hell Star Wars has become since, because it's only gotten worse. But I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. Let's make this happen. Let's do things. And there were people, and you could tell the age of people just by how they reacted to certain scenes, because Star Wars Episode 3 and really all of the prequels have been so Reddit-fied by r/prequel memes and the rest of them. So for every memeable moment that you might be able to recognize, you had people chuckling, and you had people laughing, and you had people referencing things they were talking amongst themselves. And I'm sitting there with my drink and my burger, because I was in one of those nice theaters where you can order food and sit there and pig out on a reclined chair, and just watching the film go on. And I thought it was kind of interesting, because the last time I saw Revenge of the Sith was in movie theaters, or that was the last time I saw it like on the big screen. It was 2005 at a midnight release of the film with my dad at 10 years old, on a base movie theater living overseas. And so to go from, being like 9-10 years old to now being at 29 going on 30, watching this film, it was particularly interesting. One, the special effects held up a lot better than I thought on the big screen. The dialogue is still delightfully corny, and it was weird to have this wave of nostalgia. But also, like, on the Digital Archipelago, Gio and I covered Revenge of the Sith's portion from the Camille Paglia book about images, and now she gives this huge praise about the scenes and the subtext and everything like that. And it was really funny to watch, because there was this, like, I think it was a Zoomer couple right next to me, and one of them had pulled out this emoji of like a shocked face, and it was very much it was basically a soy jack over one of the lines that had got said. And my friend and I had both caught it, and we were laughing our ass off, because like this film that is meant to give you this like space opera, melodramatic, the death of liberty, the death of democracy, this is how evil and the empire has finally come to fruition, the circle is complete, the story is done, it is finished. And all of a sudden, you've got people laughing at the dialogue, and you've got people laughing at like, go beat those kids, like go kill those younglings, Anakin, go do God's work. And it was just really funny to watch as people were chuckling at various parts of the film, and I'm sitting there, trying to cover my face, because I'm trying not to laugh at the people around me, because they're all enjoying it for vastly different reasons. And I'm sitting there with like my little serious hat on, thinking about like, wow, how do I talk about this film 20 years later? Because, this is clearly, you've got everything in the political backdrop of 2005. George W. Bush just got reelected. We invaded Afghanistan. The war in Iraq is happening. The tide of popular opinion about both of those conflicts is very much on the other side, from rah, let's do it, to maybe we should find a way out, or maybe the war is getting unpopular. And, oh, by the way, John Kerry sucks. And so, to watch Natalie Portman, who I will forever have a crush on just because of the movie Garden State, goes out. She's like, well, this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's kind of based, actually. I'm thinking to myself, don't make me pro-Empire, especially in the context of modern day Star Wars apparently having like a sexual assault scene or whatever in one of their TV shows. I'm like, well, don't you see how the Empire is so bad and evil? And I'm just thinking to myself, well, sure, but also like any sleazeball does that. I'm now consciously falling into that like dialectical trap about media literacy and things like that. I'm like, ever notice how these things are never about like the actual criminals? It's like Law and Order. Like Law and Order would never be a TV show if it was like statistically accurate Law and Order. It's like, oh wow, like the minority rapist was the guilty party all along, and the episode's over in 10 minutes. Like Law and Order wouldn't exist. It's always white criminals. But it's really funny to watch this film 20 years later, because I mean, yeah, there's some cheesy dialogue. But also like so love has blinded you, it's because I'm so in love with you. Like those are actual dumb shit lovers have said, young lovers have said. Like my friend, like he was like, I think I've accidentally said something word for word like Anakin to my ex-girlfriend. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Anakin is still the avatar for sensitive young men everywhere, and I don't think there's a problem with that. Heaven forbid a white boy feel a little emotions from time to time and just has to, throw back a few younglings, if you know what I'm saying. But the sort of this political melodrama about the teacher versus the student, the destruction of the Senate between Palpatine and Yoda and things like that. Like, wow, this feels really good, and I can appreciate all the technical effects for it, but like, it's hard for me to like look at this and be like, oh, this is how liberty dies with thunderous applause. And I'm like, liberty died like, I don't know, 40 million illegals ago. Liberty died with the destruction of freedom of association. Liberty died in the same way that like Palpatine talks about it in episode 1. The bureaucrats control everything. The senators don't do anything. Like, liberty dies when former Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska explains during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings in like 2018, 2017, that Congress doesn't do its job. It writes shell legislation, and that the courts are the only place where Americans have politics anymore. And I'm like, yeah, liberty's been dead. But it's those high ideals about American democracy or American republicanism that still live very true. It's these huge mythological idols that we have. There is idolatry behind the American Constitution. And you can read the Federalist Papers. You can read Democracy in America. You can read the Anti-Federalist Papers. You can read all these things from the early founding of America. And you realize that these were really high-minded men who took a lot of things for granted about what it meant to have a high-trust Anglo-Saxon society. And those things we can't take for granted anymore because, A, they're gone. America's not primarily, I mean, it still is majority, and for a lot of like the white population, it still, traces its roots to its Anglo-Celtic background. But also, we don't have that anymore. We don't have the rights of the states. We killed, the ability to exit. We don't have a separatist movement anymore because that died in 1865. And the nail in the coffin for it was killed in 1965. And for all the people that are calling things woke right, or these dangerous guys that are just like the woke left want the death of democracy and liberty. And it's just like, liberty died decades ago. You think that God said it is finished, not on the day that he rested and not upon the cross, but when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law. You don't believe in anything other than that everything was ordered around this post-war consensus. And that's what liberty is. Liberty died much longer than that. Liberty's been dead for a long time. But here I am to watch poor little Natalie Portman be this high-minded, idealistic senator telling me how awful the war is and that things need to end. And I can't help but think to myself, oh, If only you knew. There's this political idealism that I might have shared in 2014 and in 2015 when I was like 19, 20 years old. And I certainly did. I don't have any normie social media anymore, but I wrote these posts about idealism and the American Republic and the things to believe in and about it. It was the civic religion of the United States, and I don't really believe in it anymore. I believe in the high-minded ideals that came upon it, and there are things that you can read even from people that we kind of consider the villains of American history. I mean, you read about Woodrow Wilson, and you read his address about the Russian Revolution, and he sounds like a Christian nationalist. And you're like, huh, that's interesting. There is that idealism that still exists in America, and a lot of our problems are far more recent than we realize, but also their progenitors are much older as well. And so to watch this film, I couldn't help but chuckle and enjoy the nice little space opera, listen to the epic John Williams score. But I kind of walked away just thinking to myself, wow, this film has aged awkwardly. Not in the sense about memes and things like that, but just it's aged awkwardly in the sense that, well, you have this liberal boogeyman about authoritarianism and strong men. And it's just like, I kind of wish that Trump was like Palpatine, but he's not, because he still has his own ideals about what America is and not what I think it is. And so, yeah, liberty has been dead for quite some time. It didn't come with thunderous applause. That came in the backdrop of riots, violence, terrorism, and bureaucrats and nonprofit organizations scheming in the background. There is no emperor, at least not yet. And if we do get Caesar, a la the Spenglerian sense of the word, like many others have predicted that we would, and that we live in an age of Caesars, well, if we do get a return to strong men and strong gods, so be it. I just hope that it doesn't lead to the Spenglerian decline and crystallization and being frozen. I don't want that, but I'm not really in charge of history now, am I? And I did a video not too long ago talking about Theodore Judson, the writer of Fitzpatrick's War and the Martian General's Daughter, where Judson said we always want to have the future written down for us. We always want to predict, because man at a certain point stopped trusting in God and gods and started trusting in his own reason and capability. And the moment we stop being able to predict the future, the moment we lose faith in ourselves and the modern system. And again, as I concluded with that, I think that it's sort of important for us to consider, oh, well, there's a reason why, the Lord makes it very clear. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry unto itself. Sufficient is the day as its own evil. The today has a lot of evil. Today has a lot of problems. And I can't really help but think about what I'm supposed to do. But I pray that I get to enjoy the same benefits that the psalmist writes about the man who fears the Lord, and to see my children's children, and to see the peace of those around me. But yeah, liberty's been dead for a while. It is sort of funny to watch this film 20 years later and be like, huh, as much as I enjoy it, and I do, I have an unabashed millennial appreciation for the prequels because I grew up with them. And it's not going to stop. There's that Bowling for Soup parody called 2005 by Billy Cobb, which is really good. And I feel the exact same way about that. It's my own moment of getting older, my own moment of realizing the passage of time has happened. And that's okay. And that's acceptable. But yeah, liberty's dead. It didn't come with thunderous applause. We cheer on the guy that maybe will drive the stake through the system, or whoever emerges from the ashes to finish it off. Because in a lot of ways, I don't think liberty returns until the dragon of our current system is slayed by whoever our St. George will be. Only time will tell. But that's really all I've got for the lecture portion of all this. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I will I'll get to the super chats, and we'll just we'll carry it on. So yeah, let's go on. I'll start with the ones on entropy first, and then we'll carry on from there here. So Hunger says, just catching up and watching us during work hours. He says, good morning, friends. Well, good morning, Hunger. Hunger, a couple of years ago, gifted me Elden Ring, and then another patron gifted me the DLC a few months ago. And so I finally decided to play through the whole thing, and I have Hunger to appreciate that. So thank you. But also thank you for the super chat. I greatly appreciate it. SS13, that's a great game to play if you can find a good server. He says, sorry to hear about the Doge. Got what we voted for award times 50. Friends help friends, even if not friends. Well, that's very true. Friends do help friends. You know, you see friend, you help friend. See friend, hug friend. It's that simple. And then on YouTube, Jay Ford renewed his membership for the YouTube memberships. I appreciate that. There was another one. Aramaic Discourse did it as well, so thank you. Jay Ford just sends $5. I appreciate that nonetheless. And then Quistats Chatterack says, "Where did you get your copy of Fitzpatrick's War? I can only find it for like $500." My physical copy of Fitzpatrick's War came from a bookstore in my home, where I call home, I guess now. It was going out of business, and I found it just sitting there. It had not been claimed yet. This is also the same place where I got my copy of What Went Wrong, the creation, the collapse of the Black Jewish Alliance. And so I found it by pure happenstance. I know it's like $500. I will say this. There are some people, including Charles Haywood, that are trying to get Judson's books published again. He's not dead, by the way. A lot of people speak of him as he is. He's just an older baby boomer. He's born in the late 50s. He's still alive, and he had a blog for a short period of time. So it's kind of wild to consider, you know, all that. But yeah, it happened by pure happenstance. Needed to get some water. Then Robert Weisenfeld just sends $1.99. Well, I appreciate that, Robert. Thank you very much. Sam153 asks on Entropy, working and listening, when is the next DA? I need to talk to GU about that, because we have an anime series that we need to finish reviewing. And then Charlie Mackey says, "Good morning. I hope you and yours are well." Well, mine is, I'm doing okay. My girlfriend has been better, although I'm going to see her at the end of the month and to ask a very important question. But she's dealing with a sort of a family tragedy. Her grandmother is about to pass away, so I've been praying for her very closely and dearly. But other than that, Charlie, I'm okay. I really can't complain about life. But with all this free time in between looking for jobs, I've been painting. I've been writing some things. I've been trying to plan out when to do another Stalin's War series, and then go from there. So yeah, I've been busy in that regard, Charlie, but I'm all right. I do get paid out until the end of the month. That was my nice little severance that they were able to give me, so I can't complain. Local government has its ups and downs, but who knows? We'll see what God has in store for me ahead. I trust in him and his infinite mercy, because for some reason I'm still alive and kicking, and he has not destroyed me by my own iniquity, so thank God for that. Prude was outed as a weeb. Whoa, well, I wasn't outed as a weeb. It's more of an important thing that no, it's not over that. It's not over. It's just on a break. No, a gentleman paid Gio and I very handsomely to review it. Although I've seen more anime than I'm going to admit publicly. But it's not something that I'm thinking about. I'm going to go watch something on Crunchyroll today. I don't have a subscription or anything like that. I just listen and see what's out there. But yeah, it's okay. But I think I'll start doing these more in the long run, I think. Like I used to, where I would just give my thoughts on random things. It'll be at a more scheduled hour, probably after I get a job. But yeah, well, I'll be out and about, and I'll be busy. But we'll do these more often, probably once a week or so. And we'll get there going. Jay Ford says, "I hope your burger was good. If it wasn't, I'm sorry." Actually, the burger was delicious. I'm not gonna lie. I've had a few good burgers in my time. What happened to my my job? It's simply there were. Long story short, I worked with various programs that were federally funded that got cut, and ergo the things that got me paid were going to be cut. So the area in government which I worked, and I'm trying not to be specific for obvious reasons, was reduced in size, and myself and a few others were laid off. So that's what happened. Yeah, I literally worked for dim programs, but my programs helped small town America, so I really can't complain. ML Wiz says, "For your fun, sir, thank you for what you do." Well, I greatly appreciate it. I'm very blessed that I have some passive income from doing this and some other things on the side. So yeah, I appreciate that. And then this is incredibly generous of you, Chud Guevara, although I love the name. I'm a very big fan. He says, "Good luck with the job hunt. Mine starts end of the year." Well, Mr. Guevara, I will be I'll pray for you nonetheless when that comes to the end. I have a long list of people I pray for whose names I don't know because I only know their internet handles. So I literally just have written down in my little commemorations book of names of people I pray for during the day. For those whose names I do not know, but only know them online and anonymously, I ask for the Lord to be with them in all that they may need. So I will make sure to put you down on that list as well. I did get doged. I did get doged, but no, I worked primarily with infrastructure was what I worked for. So yeah. Any good tips for writing a good resume? Oh man, I have a friend who is a business owner who I gave my resume to, and he tore me apart. So as soon as I finish editing it, I'm going to put that new resume out there. But I mean, don't be too high level. Like, these are the things that I'm associated with or I've done. Do be specific, and depending on your background, make it look like you know what you're talking about. So yeah. Yeah, 4 clubs. I can put you on my list. I sure can. That's not a problem. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. So, and we have it at a nice, convenient hour and a half, like I had said. So this worked out perfectly. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I will be back next week, probably with a video essay or so. And then I got to talk to Gio when we're covering that anime series. And then, yeah, we'll be back with more stuff to come. I would recommend that if you're going to send stuff or do support, I know Substack is a great place to send money, but also Subscribestar. The link is down below in the description. I would prefer that over anything else because that monthly stuff helps out for expenses in the meantime. And then, yeah, we'll be live. Oh yeah, it is Friday. The video is. I will conclude on this story since it's a fun one. It's Friday. I post that at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern every day. And so for the longest time, because it's Shake It from the Metro station. And for the longest time, I got a DM like 2.5 years ago when I started doing this silly little meme. And it was from a guy named Mason. And I didn't think anything of it. And he had simply said, "Thanks for using my music in your video. I love it." And I thought, oh, I didn't think anything of it. I simply said, I gave him a thumbs up. And I said, well, thanks for, let me use it. And it took me like a year and a half to figure out, oh, that's Mason Musso, the guy who started the band and sings in the Metro station, related to Mitchell Musso, for those who know Hannah Montana. And I thought to myself, wow, my dumbass didn't think anything of it. And now he's like followed by Charlie Kirk. He's like an Elon Musk reply guy, and he's kind of like conservative coded. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what a strange small world. I've been using his music. I didn't know that was him this whole time. So I'm retarded. But I am. I truly am. Am I still going to the OGC conference? Yes, Robert, I am. And I am speaking at the OGC conference Saturday morning. I'm always speaking in the mornings on those conferences because of my kidney transplant. I can't drink heavily. So I've always been told by the organizers and by my friends, we know you can speak in the morning because you will not be hungover. So I will be speaking at the conference, and I will be talking about political realism and futurism and what's to come next. So with all that being said, just going to check entropy one more time. Okay, we're good. We're off to the races, and we're going to do what we have to do. And I will be there. Oh, it's a shame that you won't be there, Charlie. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you last year, and I'm looking forward to seeing returning faces and friends once again. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all next time, hopefully in a video essay. Take care, gents.